In today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint water in a few easy steps. Anyone can follow along because I will guide you through everything step by step, and you can use whatever drawing software you have. For today, I'm going to use Photoshop. Make sure to download the color palette and full PSD file for free. The link is in the description below. Let's go. If you're using Photoshop, I want to quickly show you how to import the swatches. So make sure your swatches are turned on. If they're not, go to Windows and select Swatches. Then go to this icon menu right here, go down and select Import Swatches. From here, you want to navigate to your downloaded file and simply select it and click Load or Open. I'm not going to do that because I already have my swatches prepared. Okay, so here is my canvas resolution if you want to work in the same canvas size. And the brushes I'll be using for today are default brushes already available in Photoshop. So when you go to the brushes, you'll see these general brushes. Before we start, we need to have in mind that water is transparent and highly reflective. And depending on its environment and type of water, it changes colors. For today, we're going to paint ocean water, sea water, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to use these blue shades for the water. So create a new layer underneath the cube layer right here. On this isometric cube, we can easily practice different light reflections. So for example, if the light is coming from this corner right here, the top plane will be the lightest, the left plane will be slightly in shadows, and the right plane will be completely in shadows. However, as we mentioned, water is transparent, so the lighting rule will be a little bit different for this. First, let's start by selecting the cube and filling it with a deep blue color. So press L on your keyboard, but you want to go with polygonal lasso tool right here, because this tool helps us to create straight selections. It is not a freehand selection. Press G on the keyboard and color pick this dark blue color. Let's rename this layer to base layer. And then go to the cube layer and slightly lower the opacity to maybe 30%, like so. Let's create a new layer above the base one. Go ahead and select again selection tool and paint this top layer light blue. So this top layer will be the surface with waves, so you want to keep it separated, and this is the only plane that is the lightest. So let's rename it to surface. Okay, we need to make an illusion of transparency, so let's create the bottom of our cube. What we are going to do is to create a new layer above the base layer. And by holding Alt on your keyboard, you'll get this little arrow. And when you click it, you basically clipped this layer to this shape. And clipping masks are super useful when it comes to painting. And what it does is everything you draw on the clipped layer is going to stay within the shape of the base. Okay, so grab selection tool once again and select this bottom part of the cube. And fill it up with this color right here. I even call this color bottom, so it's easier for you to navigate through the colors. Okay, we're going to repeat the same process. So create a new layer, hold Alt and clip it. Again, grab the lasso tool and create one more layer of the bottom, just to indicate that there's an edge of the bottom. So I'm just going to, with this dark blue, and fill it up. So we can rename this one to bottom 1, bottom 2. After we are done with that, let's go to the surface. And first we're going to shape this plane to look more like water and waves on the top. So grab an eraser, press E on your keyboard. And I'm going with this hard round brush, or you can go with this hard round pressure size brush, whatever you want to work with. So going back and forth with the brush and the eraser, create random shapes to indicate that there are waves on the top. Next, we are going to do some ocean foam on the top. So create a new layer and clip it to the surface layer. For this color, pick the lightest color on the swatches. And for this step, I'm using this hard round pressure size brush. With this brush, you can make more precise lines. This step is also pretty random, so draw random lines. The only thing that I would recommend to have in mind, if you created those little, spikes for the waves, make sure that the lines are following that spike. For example, something like this. and like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. And now let's draw it in different direction so they intersect like this. Again, this is also super random, and you can go back and forth with it just to see what looks the best to you. And now we can go ahead and like try to make them more circular. So draw these little triangles in the corners. You don't have to do them in every single corner, just where you think it will look good. After we are done with that, let's create a new layer underneath this one. And this time decrease the layer opacity to 50%. And I'm staying in the same color. I'm going to repeat the same steps and follow the lines, but this time I will create more random lines, something like this. Because this is really random, and in nature this foam forms randomly, so you don't have to really think too much about it. Once we're done with that, we can select those two layers and merge them by pressing Ctrl E on your keyboard, and now you have only one layer. Okay, and now let's duplicate this layer. Yes, and let's move it down to the bottom layer. That's right, we are moving it way down, and let's bring it on the bottom of the ocean. Okay, now we see this really ugly lines right here. We are going to erase them. Okay, then go to the filter, select blur and Gaussian blur, and make it to 3% blur. Press OK. We can now lower the opacity to see how it looks. You can basically leave 100%. You can put it to maybe 40%. And this way we created that illusion of transparency and reflection from the top. Okay, I'm going to stay on this base shape, and I'm going to create a new layer on top of all of these layers. And just with hard round pressure size brush, let's paint this line just to indicate the shape of the cube, only for the purposes of this practice. And now we can turn off the cube layer and leave it like this. Let's name this line so we don't get confused. Okay, let's paint some depth in our ocean. So I'm going with this soft round pressure opacity brush, and I'm going to create a new layer. And with this middle tone blue, make sure to paint the lighter color closer to the surface, because that's where the light is the most visible. Go ahead and color pick this dark blue and make some variations for depth. So for example, here on the bottom will be a little bit more darker. You can go back and forth between those two colors. You can color pick this light blue and also paint some light coming from the top. Okay, if you're not satisfied how it looks, go with an eraser and just select the same brush and erase the parts you think you need. So let's make the bottom more darker. So go back to the foam lines layer, and I honestly think this looks better if the opacity is a little bit higher, so maybe 70%. I think it looks better when it's more visible. Okay, go back to the bottom layer and press Ctrl U on your keyboard, and you'll get this little menu for hue and saturation. What you want to do is only play with this lightness slider. Do not touch those two. We don't need to change hue and saturation, only the lightness. Go and slightly darken it to the point that you think it looks good. You can see here how it looked and how it looks now, and I think this is better than before. So press OK. So what we can also do is to color pick this lighter color and lower the opacity of the brush to maybe 40% and paint maybe just these parts a little bit lighter, something like this. We can rename this layer to depth. So what I'm going to do next is to create a new layer, and I'm going with this hard round pressure opacity and flow brush. color pick this light blue, and we're going to paint the light that is coming from the top. Okay, we can color pick this blue color, dark blue, and create some variations. Next thing you want to do is go back to this layer that we just painted and color pick this dark blue, and with the same brush, soft round, let's paint some darker shadows closer here to the top. Okay, now let's go back to the surface layer and let's work on this part. So go back to the surface layer and create a new one. Now let's pick this soft round pressure opacity brush and increase the size of it, like this. So we can start with this middle blue, color pick that color and slightly create a gradient. Now you can color pick this darker blue and also create some darker shades. Now let's create another layer and decrease the size of the brush. We are still using soft round brush. Let's change this blending mode for this layer to soft light. We are going to paint the light reflection, and when you paint, make sure to stay inside these shapes and follow the shape lines. And now let's go back to the layer below, and I'm still using soft round brush, but I'm color picking this dark blue, and then we're going to create illusion of depth from the surface of the water. Now we have a few more steps to do to finish this practice. So I'm going back to the foam lines layer, and I'm going with this hard on pressure size, and I'm just going to correct some parts where I think lines should be thicker. You don't have to do this step if you don't want to. Maybe you already fixed your lines, but I just think it will be better if I just fix them and clean them a little bit. Once I'm satisfied how it looks, I'm going to create a new layer above all of these layers, and I'm not going to clip to any shape. And then I'm just going to create some foam lines outside this shape, just to give it more illusion, like the waves are splashing, or you know, the water is splashing. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect, it's just a little detail to add if you want to. You can also add some drops, like the water is splashing outside this shape, as well as some reflections. And then it's all about adjusting the colors. You can go back to the layer and maybe go to the color wheel and try some different shades, or maybe, you know, add more saturation or add more darker values. So I'm just going to adjust some parts. Go back to the base shape and add more light that is coming through the surface. So as we said, the water is not affected by the light as same as some solid materials. However, the deeper the ocean, the darker it will be. So paint the sides dark blue. And a few more details to add. We can go to this layer that we have, this line. It doesn't really matter. Select this hard brown pressure opacity brush. Go to your lightest blue that we have right here and create some dots, make some bubbles. And yeah, play with colors, play with shapes. You can also find different references and see how the water behaves and how it creates those patterns on the surface. Other than that, that's it. Make sure to check out the other videos from this series and learn how to paint some other materials. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!